It would have been very hard not to notice the flamboyance and exuberance of the Pride 2003 celebrations in Dublin. Many, if not most of those present, were too young to remember the bad old days of 30 years ago, when the legal situation and the cultural climate associated with it meant that people could be blackmailed or lose their jobs, and when taking part in a public affirmation of lesbian and gay identities was for most people unthinkable. A few resourceful individuals, however, were beginning to step out. It was here in Trinity College Dublin, in a top-floor room in House 4, Front Square, that a small group of people, lesbian, gay and heterosexual, met in 1973 to set up the sexual liberation movement.
What I remember is coming back from France in the autumn of '73 and walking up towards Grafton Street on a very wet, cold winter night and thinking, why the fuck have I come back to Dublin? And being with my girlfriend of the time, Irene Brady, and seeing on a lamppost, just a college green there, a painted placard, handwritten placard, you know, sexual liberation movement starts tonight, number 4, Trinity College. And we just stopped dead and said, we have to go over there. So in we came, right to where we're standing here, went in the door, number 4, up the stairs, shyly opened the door, and there were 2 women and 3 men, as I remember. 2 of the guys were Hugo McManus and Jerry McNamara, and Margaret McWilliams and Ruth Riddick. So to that number were added then Mary Dorsey and Irene Brady, and we had a movement. Having exchanged our life stories and having done the consciousness-raising part of meeting together, I think very quickly we became focused on the need to affect change in the society around us, and that we had to make some big public demonstration of our presence. And we invited David Norris, who was a lecturer at that time and involved in the civil liberties movement, over to address us. I didn't know that David was gay then, and I'm not sure how many others did. We decided to have the symposium, which took place in '74 in the junior common room. And we planned it with tremendous excitement, but thinking that, you know, maybe we'd get 20 or 30 people.
The speakers were Dr. Noel Brown, Rose Robertson, Father Enda McDonough and Babs Todd. Margaret McWilliams and Hugo McManus made history in the run-up to the symposium when they were the first openly gay people interviewed on Radio Éireann.
On February the 16th, 1974, we came up this staircase to have the first symposium ever on gay rights in Ireland. It was an extraordinary day, and it was the start of all the changes that have since happened in Ireland. And it was the first time publicly, I think, in the South anyway, the questions of sexual orientation had ever been addressed. We came out of a society that was as repressed as Stalinist Russia, and the kind of openness that we started then, the silence breaking, was so extraordinary that its repercussions are still being felt.
The expectations of the organisers were far exceeded. Instead of 30 people, more than 300 turned up for the meeting. Christina Murphy covered the event in the Irish Times.
When I saw a flyer referred to as the first one, it was referring to the first gay national event that was open to the public. And it was held in Trinity College over a weekend, a 2-day period. The first day was a Saturday, and it was open to everyone, and the second day was more or less closed shop. It was where we were to get in different groups, and there were some guest speakers there also.
Rose Robertson appeared on The Late Late Show, and for the first time homosexuality was discussed on Irish television.
After that, a lot of us got together and founded the Irish Gay Rights Movement. We felt that we were going to stick more to particular gay rights than general sexual rights. We also found Tell a Friend, which was the start of the gay switchboard in Dublin. We weren't allowed to use the word gay, the telephone company wouldn't take it, so we had to use the word Tell a Friend. And fortunately now, the word gay is fairly acceptable.
In 1975, Irish television viewers caught sight of their first openly gay man in the flesh, David Norris.
David, are homosexuals sick people? No, indeed they're not. We're neither sick, ill, pathological, neurotic, or any of these emotive terms that are occasionally used by people who are not well informed on the subject to conceal their own prejudices and to allege that we are ill. I don't feel ill. I hope I don't look it.
But what would you say to people who would regard a homosexual as a perverted person or an immoral person?
The word perverted, again, carries emotive connotations, and usually the type of person who uses a word like perverted is using it to project their own feeling of dislike of the homosexual, which is irrational and emotional, and is not in fact a scientific or clinical way of looking at things at all. And they've now reached the state in America of regarding homophobe people, people who have an irrational fear or dislike of homosexuals, as those who are really ill. Not us, it's people who are irrationally afraid. Now, neither do we feel ourselves to be immoral. It is possible, of course, for a homosexual person to be immoral, as it is for a heterosexual person. But there is nothing intrinsically immoral, unhealthy, or evil about relating affectionally and sexually to a member of one's own sex.
Well, what does it really mean to be a homosexual in Ireland?
It's a difficult question to answer, because it's a perfectly ordinary thing.
Now, I'm referring to lesbians as well, of course.
Yes, of course, and I'm glad you brought this up, because it is International Women's Year, and we don't want to leave the women out of this either. And I think very few people really understand that the word homosexual means attracted people of the same sex. Many people think the homo part of it is man. It's not. It's the Greek meaning the same. Well, of course, lesbians in Ireland are in a difficult situation, of course, as we all are, but they don't suffer as the men do from the very severe penalties that the law can, but I'm glad to say does not at the moment inflict on homosexual people. Some of the women, may I say, regard this as a grievance, because they feel that at least we men have something very dramatic to fight about, a very grave and very serious injustice that it's difficult to understand being tolerated in Europe of the 1970s. The women don't have this axe to grind, and I think they'd rather like to.
Do you know any people who are homosexual?
No, not really. I think it's natural, really. People can't help it, can they? I mean, it's more, they say it's something to do with it lands.
The visit of Gay Sweatshop Theatre Company to the Project Arts Centre in 1976 with Any Woman Can and Mr. X incurred the wrath of the extreme right and cost the centre its funding from Dublin Corporation.
We, as representing the right person of Dublin Corporation, must have some say in the type of play that's going to be shown.
Do you know, Mr. Brennan, do all your constituents think that it's fair of you to call homosexuals funny bunnies?
Well, it's a matter of opinion that, of course. I'm satisfied I speak for the majority.
I discovered that my orientation was towards members of my own sex for the same reasons, not with the same motives as anybody else, for companionship, for emotional stimulation, satisfaction, and the usual things that one forms relationships for.
When I was getting a bit older, I was kind of aware there was maybe it was different, and I hid it. There was no anti-homosexual feeling going around the house, but there was sort of atmosphere everywhere that that you were kind of well, it was a sin, and it was just wrong, and I also had this kind of weird impression that all sort of homosexuals were kind of nasty people, you know, and that I'm turning into one of them.
I used to hop off to youth club dances and what have you, and all the girls would be frantically Google-eyed over various fellows, you know, and I was never particularly in awe, but one would be in awe not to be out of the thing. It hadn't occurred to me at that stage, but later I fell in love with a friend of mine. We were knocking about together for a long time, it first then began to dawn on me.
I wonder why you use this expression gay, why homosexuals use this very expression. Because after all, it isn't always very gay, is it?
Well, I don't know about I don't know how much you know about the gay world, of course, so I'll just...
Well, I'm learning fast.
Yeah. So we got it.
It's an international
It's
code.
an international word.
I think
you say it's a code.
It's true,
Jimmy.
because no matter which country you go to, you can go to a gay bar and you feel quite secure.
The majority of homosexuals prefers to stay out of the limelight, to keep their activities secret, not to rock the boat, to stay away from organised associations. Yet others belong to more radical political groups like Gays Against Repression.
Body is sexually repressed, that sexuality is something that is given specific limitations within this society. We are told we can be sexual beings after we've finished work at, 9 o'clock. We can go to a bar, we can go dancing, and we can, go home then and go to bed. And our sexuality is defined by society. The individual is not allowed to make a choice to say, I wish to live and have my personal relationships as I choose.
Without telling anyone, I went to a meeting of gay people in Dublin. And from that one meeting, I kind of felt so excited. I said, I'm not going to bother hiding this thing anymore. I'm not the only one. There's hundreds of, well, there was about 20 men and women at that meeting. That was enough for me. I kind of rushed home and told my mother in secret.
I was on the committee of the old IGRM when the proposal came from RTE that they would like to come in and do a documentary film in the new premises in Parnell Square that had been acquired some months beforehand, and we were successfully running a disco for those number of months in the basement at that stage. So RTE came in, and it was announced on the night beforehand that there would be TV cameras discreetly going around the disco floor, and those that might not want to be filmed were being made aware of that, and those who would have no problem with being filmed would do so, which is very much the case really today. I recall several reactions, in fact, to when the programme went out. One was my own and people who I lived with and mixed with in Dublin, and it was all very positive and very jovial, which was great. But interestingly, I do recall that one of my own siblings, whom I was out to in the country I come from, Tipperary, remarking almost surreptitiously to me, did you see the chap you share a flat with in Dublin was on that TV programme? And it was more or less, how are you going to deal with this if somebody asks you? And I said, like, yes, so what?
After the transmission of the Tuesday Report programme, the newly formed Broadcasting Complaints Commission received its first complaint from Ms Maura Brannock. Although the Commission didn't uphold her complaint, it did have reservations about the dancing, but then who wouldn't? Later that year, David Norris ran for Shannon Éireann for the first time, receiving 220 votes. And on David Norris's behalf, Senator Mary Robinson Senior Counsel issued a plenary summons in the High Court against the Government of Ireland, arguing that the laws on homosexual activity were repugnant to the Constitution. On St Patrick's Day 1979, the Hirschfeld Centre opened on Fowne Street in Dublin.
It was the night that Byrne had the lesbian on, and I suppose it's ironic that it was actually a lesbian. That was my first view of somebody else who was gay in Ireland rather than a gay man. But at the time in Ireland, I grew up thinking that I was the only gay person in the country.
I was in the sitting room with my mum and dad down in deepest, darkest Sligo, and it was the first gay person I'd ever seen on Irish television. And it was also the use of the word gay and the use of the word lesbian that really rang or meant something to me when I saw that show. It was the first time I really identified the word gay as relating to myself in a very positive way.
Joni Crone appeared on The Late Late Show on 9th of February 1980.
The situation she finds herself in, being a lesbian. You have no reservations about talking to us, Joni, no? No, very good. Now, can I start by asking you, how did you first discover that you were a lesbian, in fact?
Well, my first discovery of the word and my awareness that there were such things was really by reading a book from under my big brother's bed. So you can imagine what kind of a book it was.
And how old would you have been at that stage?
13, 14.
And had you ever felt before that you were somehow different or strange? Or?
Yes, right through my teens, I felt different. But I didn't feel that I was lesbian or gay. I just felt different.
And how did you greet the knowledge when you realised from looking at this book, how did you cope with that knowledge?
I identified to a degree. I said, yes, that's me. But I ran a million miles away at the same time. I said, oh, no, that's not me. I'm not one of them.
Now, did you tell anybody when this great discovery came to you? Did you tell anybody? Did you discuss it with anybody?
No, I hid it for years and years. I couldn't bear to tell my family, my friends, anybody. I was ashamed, basically.
You went to London then at some stage?
Yes, when I had relationships with men, and some bad, some good, some very good. I better find out before I die what lesbianism is all about. So I didn't think there was the slightest possibility of meeting a lesbian in Ireland, so I took the boat to London. Well, I was different when I came back. I was acting different. I looked different. So my family naturally objected. They wanted me to see a psychiatrist, and I thought about it for quite a while, but I refused. And I left home, and there was an enormous amount of family trauma, naturally. And I was very mixed up and confused until I made contact with a gay rights group here, which incidentally I found out about in London. I didn't know there was any such thing while I was living here. And a women's group. And it was through making contact with both these groups that I realized there were thousands, hundreds and thousands of gay women in Ireland, all over the world, who didn't find it necessary to act like men, and that I could just be myself and have a happy life and still be gay.
Now, your parents, would they be watching tonight?
They probably are.
Have you any thought to the sorrow or annoyance or
yes.
Depression, you would call it?
Yes, I had an opportunity earlier last year to go on television, and I told them about it and we discussed it. And they raised their objections about family, of course, and neighbours and my relations and so on. And I understand that. But I also feel that I've got my life to live, and I've only the one life, and I feel I've got to be true to myself. And I've got my say as well.
And are they totally unable to understand what it's about?
Not totally, no. I must give them every credit that they've been very understanding and very tolerant. Not initially. They were very hostile and felt very guilt-ridden and very ashamed, and just as I did. But they now feel that I've tried to change, they've tried to change me, and they accept that I am gay and I'm not going to get married, I'm not going to have children, but that I'm happy the way I am.
I think the first programme I saw was the one with Laurie and Arthur, who subsequently became good friends of mine. But I remember I almost certainly was in the Hirschfeld of watching it in company of a lot of other people, and a sense of huge pride, delight in seeing a very sensitive programme shown on Irish television.
Laurie and Arthur met in London 5 years ago. Laurie is Australian and Arthur is from Cork. They've decided to come back to Ireland to try and make a life for themselves together in Cork. When did Arthur first realise he was gay?
Actual realisation that I was gay would probably have, it kind of creeps on you over the idea that you're different, which emerges from that, you know, the way you see other people moving from you in their activities and their energies.
How did you both meet one another?
It was in London, in a nightclub in the King's Road.
And how long ago was that?
Sorry?
How long ago was that?
I think it was 1975.
Is it unusual, Art, to have a gay relationship that looks like being permanent?
Relationships are not reinforced by the society around you, that you are very much on your own, and if you take, again, it goes back to the development of because your kind of sexual development has taken place in such a, I would say, impoverished surroundings, that when you actually come to relate to somebody, that you don't really have the capacity to do so.
Has it been difficult to maintain this relationship?
Yes, I mean, there's been lots of there's lots of conflict inside yourself. I mean, from not having related to people very closely myself, you know, when I was younger, you know, that to start relating to another person with their own complexities, their own identity, trying to accommodate another person's needs and things like that, without sort of the society around you giving you any feedback. Like you know, you don't see other gay couples, you don't see other gays relating to each other.
What are the pressures, if any, of living as a gay couple?
The pressures are mainly that you know, it takes a constant sort of hassle to go out and be as a gay couple or a gay individual in terms of your everyday
I think
communication with society sort of thing, you know.
Comes out in terms of that a lot of gay people do live within a kind of ghetto-like situation.
How do you feel about being defined as criminals in this country?
You know, you can't define an act that you've committed sort of thing, you know, which would give a person a reason to actually enforce a criminal law, you know. I mean, I live my life, and I mean, I have good relationships with people. I mean, I can't see in myself that I've ever been offensive to anybody, you know. I don't sort of consciously do anything which harms other people.
It's quite a ridiculous situation. I think in the city, if you have the situation, for instance, at the moment with somebody like people a lot in the news about somebody like Sakharov, who's been, you know, sent to exile, an internal exile in his country, and I think there is quite a strong relationship between being gay and living in a country like Ireland. That I think a great number of gay people do live in a sense continually in exile in their own country.
I saw that on a visit home to Belfast. I had been living in London at the time. I was seriously thinking about coming home for good, and I wanted to know what it would be like to be at home in Ireland and to be out. And his strength and his energy and his courage and his boyfriends kind of gave me the courage to do it as well.
The weekend programme prompted a further complaint to the Broadcasting Complaints Commission, this time from the Irish Family League. It wasn't upheld. On 24th of June, David Norris began his High Court action against the government before Mr. Justice McWilliams. At the European Court of Human Rights, Jeff Dudgeon won his case regarding anti-gay legislation in Northern Ireland. On the 11th of October, David Norris lost his case. The Hirschfeld Centre featured on Ireland's Eye in November 1981. The Telefriend Counselling and Support Service operated out of a small top-floor room. Like virtually everything else in the centre, it was staffed entirely by volunteers.
Are you in from a pub? There's a lot of people in the background. Can you talk?
Just how difficult was it for that person to make the phone call?
Well, it's hard to understand, but I remember from my own experience that it was exceptionally difficult for him. It's the first time probably he's ever talked to anybody about his sexuality or his homosexuality. And that's the part that's the most frightening, is to come to accept it in yourself.
Now, what is the problem, actually?
Well, I suppose basically it's because we've been brought up to believe that we've all got to be normal, and normal in the inverted commas term, so that if we do anything that's slightly abnormal, there's something wrong with us.
Well, having made that phone call, is there suddenly a change of life?
There won't be a sudden change of life, no. That's something that we've got to come to terms with as telephone answerers, you know, because we do tend to try and solve the problem where it's just impossible to solve.
The programme wouldn't have been complete, of course, without a visit to the Flickers dance floor. The few intrepid dancers on display belied the popularity of the club, which was usually packed and which was in the vanguard of the dance music scene in Ireland. And as was very often the case, it wasn't just the lights that were spinning. It It was Sienna Campbell's turn for a guided tour of the Hirschfeld in 1982.
You're terribly organised here in the centre with your coffee shop and everything.
Well, it's taken a lot of work by a lot of people to get this as it is, to buy the centre and all that.
What did you feel like the first day you came down here?
Very nervous because, like, it was coming to a sort of final acceptance that I was gay, and I was sort of opening up a new lifestyle for myself. And I wasn't quite sure what that lifestyle would be. I was very unsure of myself as regards sort of what the future held for me, because I knew sort of marriage wasn't for me, and sort of all that I was brought up sort of that I'd have children, a wife, and all the family. I knew that sort of it's good, but it's not for me. So therefore I've got to replace that with something else. And I was exceptionally nervous. You know,
what actually happened when you came in, and did anybody meet you, for instance?
Oh yeah, I was met at the door, and we talked for quite some time, Dermot and I. Then we sort of came up here, and just meeting a load of gay people sort of who looked so ordinary.
Other than the coffee shop here, what else have you got in the centre?
Come on, I'll show you. There's the disco, there's the cinema, and there's a lounge area downstairs, plus a billiards table.
So what's your life like now?
I come to an odd disco, I come to cinema. I've got a lot more friends, you know, which I built up over the last year, and they mean a lot to me.
Gardaí today searched the park for clues that would lead them to the man's attackers. They say two people walking through the park found him at 1:30 this morning near the bandstand, not far from the main road. He was suffering from serious head injuries and died before he reached hospital. Later, as a pathologist carried out a post-mortem examination to ascertain the cause of death, Gardaí organised a search of the park for weapons and other clues. They're considering the possibility that the man may have been set upon by a gang of youths as he walked through the park. He had no money when found, and it's possible he had been robbed.
Well, there's only 2 gay bars in the city centre, which are confined to, like you were saying, the pink triangle. If you look at it that way, there are 2 bars in the Hirschfeld Centre, 3 points of a triangle. They're the only places you can go to. So you're pretty confined.
First times I ever saw anything was a news item in about 1983. It was around the Fairview Park murder, and I saw this in Kilrush in West Clare, where I'd never seen lesbians or gay men. I'd read about the killing, and it was just terribly shocking but terribly moving to see so many people protesting. And it was really moving to see signs up from parents saying, "My son is gay and I love him," or whatever the sign says. It was one of the most fundamentally important kind of moments for me about gay visibility in Ireland.
The sentencing for the Fairview Park killing caused outrage within the lesbian and gay community. It also prompted an unprecedented response throughout the print and broadcast media.
In the early hours of September the 10th last in Fairview Park in Dublin, Declan Flynn was set upon by 5 men, including a 15-year-old youth. He was savagely beaten, unconscious, and left mortally wounded. He inhaled blood from his mouth and nose and died from asphyxia. Yesterday, his 5 assailants were sentenced in the Central Criminal Court, convicted of the manslaughter of Declan Flynn. 2 18-year-old Air Corps soldiers, Robert Armstrong of Finglas and Anthony Marr of Ballybock, were sentenced to 5 years. Patrick Kavanagh, an 18-year-old former Dublin County minor footballer, was sentenced to 2 years. Colm Donovan of Lower Buckingham Street, a 17-year-old unemployed youth, got 4 years. And a 15-year-old juvenile was sentenced to 12 months. All of the sentences were suspended by Mr. Justice Gannon, the duration of the suspension in each case equal to the length of the sentence. Now, what this means is that if they don't get into trouble with the police during the period of their suspension, they will not serve any detention for depriving Declan Flynn of his life. Mr. Justice Gannon in court noted the jury's horror and anxiety at the nature of the crime. This crime, he said, is one which would merit severe punishment. He pointed out to the 5 accused that each was liable to be sentenced to life imprisonment. And the reason for this was that Declan Flynn's death was caused by violence, the concentrated violence of you all. Criminals you are, the judge said, but there is a factor that when a group is involved, it is much more difficult to hold back. Collective violence is much more serious than an individual acting on his own. The judge said that he had to demonstrate the abhorrence of community by imposing sentences, but it will not be necessary that these sentences be imposed immediately. One thing, he said, which has come to my mind, is that there appears to be no element of correction required. All of you come from good homes and have experienced care and affection. The words of Mr. Justice Gannon. Evan, what is your reaction to this thing, the queer bashing thing, which is now in the news headlines?
Well, I find it very hard to believe and to accept that there was any element of vigilante about the whole thing. I accept that there was queer bashing, so-called queer bashing. I dislike the term very much. But we have had evidence, and there has been a continuous build-up of evidence that there was a gang, or more than one gang, operating in Fairview Park. Gay people are apparently an easy target. They're often on their own, they're frightened, and it's late at night, and they have been an obvious target of late.
On the 22nd of April, the Supreme Court gave its verdict on David Norris's constitutional action. By a 3-2 majority, it upheld the existing law.
If you take the judgment of Mr. O'Higgins with the judgment of Mr. Justice Gannon in the Fairview Park case, it does appear as if the state is either unwilling or unable to protect the rights of individual citizens who are homosexual in this country. It also, I think, does raise a question about the Irish Constitution. 2 judges did support my case, 3 found against it, and the inevitable result is that the laws were found to be unconstitutional, constitutional. This means that the Irish Constitution can be used to support a law that is in breach of the fundamental provisions of the European Convention on Human Rights. In other words, after today, it can be said that the Irish Constitution does not protect the fundamental human rights of its own citizens.
Nobody's going to deny that the police have a duty to patrol and survey public parks and toilets. But the unfortunate fact is that the police do use public toilets to actually harass gay people.
The Access programme from 1984, I think, was probably the biggest impact for me, because it was the first visible images of gay people that I saw on television. And it was a programme that was set up by RTE, where they allowed community groups from around the country to have access to facilities to make short programmes, half-hour programmes, about the kind of work that they do. And I remember it because there was one very important aspect to it, and that was the involvement of family members in the actual programme.
Women's sexuality in general is much more oppressed, and women are not allowed to be free as sexual beings, and because of that, I think that women have stand to lose much more in coming out or admitting that they're lesbians.
But how do you make that an issue, I mean, for television, and cram that into 25 minutes?
If in a relationship problems arise, they can't go back to mother, say, for instance, and tell their problems to their mother or father, and you know, try and sort things out or get that support they need. You know, that even further isolates that person.
We should try and confront that in the programme, get a parent, speak to a parent,
right.
See what, or 2 parents maybe, and see what they feel about that.
I think that neither parent nor the young gay people should feel any sense of guilt whatsoever, because I don't know about you, but I immediately felt, where did I go wrong?
Oh yes, the first thing is totally, like, mothers always accept the blame for anything, don't you? It's all my fault, if only, you know, and the husbands too, I suppose, in certain ways, especially in this area. We did meet other young people. Some of the stories they have to tell are dreadful, because a lot of parents have been appalling parents. They've beaten them up, they've thrown them out, as far as they're concerned, into the gutter.
Terrible.
And, yeah. And our sons have been lucky, they happen to be sons, but the young men and women who found the Hirschfeld Centre are really very lucky. Yeah. Because otherwise there's no place to go except the gutter.
10,000 people marched through London when they came out for gay pride.
Dykes in denim and macho men, for once they walked side by side. Gays to the left, dykes to the right, out for the carnival. But when we turned the telly on for news that night, it hadn't happened at all. It seems that thousands of invisible people held invisible hands. Thousands of invisible people listen to silent bands.
You have tremendous erudition and a great gift of the gab, quite clearly.
Well, see, the thing is, Kay, people have this wonderfully coloured view of what I do. They think I live in some kind of perpetual orgy, I think. And I do remember I was terribly amused that I discovered that one person had said, which I thought was extremely funny and quite charming, because I had proposed one time a hostel for third-level students in George Street, and somebody in the area got hold of this and was in terrible dander over it and said, "That fella coming in here, hostels for homosexuals in a nice area, and me with 2 daughters." I mean...
We want people to educate themselves, and we want them to realise very strongly that we are not some sort of foreign imported vice or virus or anything else. We are Irish lesbians and gay men. We were born here, we were bred here, we were taught here. We've always been here, and we're just not going to be quite as invisible in the future.
Out is the title of Ireland's only magazine catering specifically but not exclusively for gay men and women. Published bi-monthly, Out has been on sale both in Ireland and Britain since the beginning of this year. And at a time when magazines in generally are doing well to keep their heads above water, Out appears to be going from strength to strength. We went inside Out to have a look.
It was decided last year there was a need for a magazine on general sale to the general public, both gay and non-gay people, which shows the range of interest that gay people have, not necessarily into gay politics, but the ordinary everyday sort of articles and sort of issues that people are interested in.
In the next issue, which is this one, it's going to be out next week, it also reveals that David Norris has cleared the first hurdle in his case at the European Commission on Human Rights, that Ireland's laws on homosexuality are anti-constitutional.
The occasion of this unusual protest vigil outside the RTE studios in 1985 was the appearance of 2 lesbian nuns on the Late Late Show. The protesters had a statue of the Virgin Mary strapped to the roof of a caravan.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, there were no lesbians or gay men on RTE when I was growing up, and I grew up in 1 channel land, then it was shortly 2 channel land. But I do remember when I was in about 12 or 13, sitting with my family and watching 2 American nuns on the Late Late Show. I don't think the word lesbian was ever actually mentioned, but I do remember feeling horribly embarrassed, getting a crick in my neck, butterflies in my stomach, not quite sure what the women were even saying or even what the questions were being asked, but I was very, very clear, you know, once the owl flew up and the credits were over, that I had a vocation.
We have seldom in our 23 years of the Late Late Show experienced a barrage of complaint and criticism about this next item as we have experienced this week. Some of it very nicely put, very charitably, very tolerant in writing and on the telephone. Alas, some of it, mainly anonymous callers on the telephone, being extraordinarily hostile, aggressive, abusive, and indeed on occasions obscene, which is a great pity. And as I say, we are accustomed to that sort of thing. The item is about a book called Breaking Silence, Lesbian Nuns on Convent Sexuality, edited by Rosemary Kerb and Nancy Manahan, who are our next 2 guests on the show. Virginia Apuzzo. She said, "I was fully aware of my homosexuality when I joined the Sisters of Charity, And I stayed 3 years searching for answers to fundamental questions, which prompts the wish that she might have gone somewhere else to find the answers.
Yes,
I mean, it's a peculiar thing to do.
She also says in her story that she had no intention of being sexually active in the convent, and nor was she. She was aware of her lesbian orientation. And in America today, the community of sisters that I belong to explicitly states that they do not discriminate against entrants on the basis of sexual orientation, that women who identify themselves as lesbians are welcome in this particular community. It's understood that they will be...
What kind of community is that?
It's Dominican sisters.
Dominican sisters?
Yes.
You mean the official Dominican sisters?
The official Dominican sisters, yes.
Nancy, how long were you in?
I left during my second year.
Second
in
year.
the novitiate.
And so you found out very quickly you'd made a mistake?
Very quickly.
Why? How did you find out?
Basically because I wasn't happy with the restrictions of religious life at that time, which was in the mid-60s.
Yeah.
It had nothing to do with my sexuality, at least not on a conscious level. We were the cream of the crop of our classes. It wasn't as if they were weeding out misfits. We were the valedictorians and the leaders of our class and the president of Sodality or of the Legion of Mary. We were the
cream.
The cream,
yes.
right?
I was definitely recruited. And I admired the sisters, still do. They were my models of intellectual dedication, of spiritual commitment. I wanted to be just like them, and they wanted me to be one of them. And we were subjected to a battery of psychological and intelligence tests. And among those, some of us were selected to go on to institutions of higher learning with the intention that we would be the high school and college teachers, that we would be the leaders of the community.
Here in Cork, a high-risk group, the city's gay community, is organising an information campaign through a branch of Gay Health Action.
The agenda today is, first of all, the production of an information pack that's in October, the distribution of the leaflet in Cork, the formation of a counselling group, a report on filling the second job in Dublin, and of course the
Gay Health Action was formed last January, mainly in response to the AIDS issue. The gays were worried at the way the media were linking homosexuals with the spread of AIDS.
We began to meet about 18 months ago to discuss the overall area of gay men's health, and as the AIDS issue developed, we took on dealing with AIDS particularly. And in January this year, Gay Health Action was set up. We've produced a leaflet aimed at gay men explaining, you know, essentially how you can protect yourself from the danger of catching the virus. And we're also producing a fact pack which is aimed at, you know, the media, trade unionists, healthcare workers, just to inform people of the facts on AIDS and what they should do, what precautions they can take.
I somehow had the impression that the moment I walked in the door, I was going to be leapt on by 10 or 20 men, all desirous of having my body.
Yes.
Of course, it wasn't at all like that. They weren't at all interested in me.
Or your body.
Or my body.
And of course, in the booklet, there's 2 pages on AIDS itself, which would be relevant to anyone in the country who wants to read about it. The booklet is going to cost $150.
The main reason for producing this book and the information pack is to ensure that it doesn't go on to become appallingly serious.
We actually get no funding from any statutory bodies at the present time. All our money has been raised over the past 2 years by the very generous donations of the lesbian and gay community and our straight friends. We have produced several leaflets and lots of information through that money being raised. We have had a continual attempt at a correspondence with the Department of Health in relation to funding, but we haven't heard anything back from them in connection with that.
After 10 years of trying, David Norris won a seat in Shanadairn in 1987.
First day I was elected and set off down to Leinster House for the first meeting of the Senate, and I'd left everything out the night before. Shoes, shirt, the works. And I got up, and of course I was in a panic because the first thing that happened was my top button popped, and I said, oh, bugger. I had to sew it on, and I got it in such a fit that I broke both my shoelaces. And I had every intention of going down and being absolutely suave, calm and dignified, and I arrived down my usual heap.
Gay Byrne's interview with Bernard Lynch,
I thought it was a wonderful interview. I thought Bernard Lynch had a great presence, a great honesty, a great strength. He's a very charismatic man, very attractive man. The only moment I found, I suppose, disappointing, or I suppose it confused me a little bit, was when Byrne asked him, was he gay? And I thought he was, and I was so, I suppose, waiting for that question, and he said he wasn't.
But the question, when it came, was clearly unexpected.
What kind of service do you provide for AIDS sufferers, Father Bernard?
Well, I was watching you there with the young fellow, James.
James Morton, yeah.
And, you know, the wonderful, warm and compassionate response of people to him really touched me. And I thought back, I spent my, my Christmas holidays going around looking for people to hug children from 1 to 2 years of age in New York City who have AIDS, and we couldn't find people to hold them and hug them and touch them and kiss them. So I went amongst mainly the gay community, who are the resource for help in the AIDS crisis in New York, and got 60 volunteers. And, you know, I'm not going to get the Nobel Peace Prize for being associated with gay people in their moment of agony, changing their bed sheets and taking them to the bathroom and going shopping for them and sleeping over with them because no one else will, or talking down their parents, or undoing the damage that has been done, or picking up mothers from Ireland coming out to New York to hear that their son is homosexual for the first time and he's dying in a hospital alone, in despair, you know. Some of them are so much in despair that they will not even have the last rites.
Are you homosexual, Father?
No.
No, you're not. I had to ask that in the context of what we were talking about.
I didn't feel betrayed by his answer. I suppose I felt disappointed that the time wasn't ready. I really thought I was going to hear this wonderful, articulate, interesting man say, yes, I'm gay.
Dear Sienna, I'm a 17-year-old youth on the verge of manhood. Yet at this moment in time, I feel very confused. The problem in my life is that I am now fully realizing that I have homosexual tendencies. This to me is very serious, as I cannot come to terms with it. I would be very grateful if you could help me in some manner, perhaps with the name of a psychologist, who might be able to shed some light on a world that appears dark and lonely.
Now, Don, maybe you can explain first what Telefriend is about and what you're trying to do in your organisation.
Right. Telefriend is a confidential counselling, information and support service for gay people, for people who are bisexual, for people who are confused in any way about their sexuality. And the kind of telephone calls and letters we get would be very much like the type we've just seen from this man, where he is worried and concerned about his sexual identity.
The implications of the European Court decision that Ireland's 19th century laws banning homosexuality are a violation of the right to privacy are being assessed in government and political circles today. As you know, the court's decision is binding, so the law will have to be changed.
The most outstanding programme for me on RTE that really affected me was The Entertainers, featuring the Dice Man Tom McGinty.
You know, sometimes I find it so hard.
Dublin has never been the same since it lost the many faces of Tom McGinty, the Dice Man.
He got me. He got me.
The Court of Human Rights had already condemned the 19th century laws penalising homosexuality as they used to apply in Northern Ireland. The key question to be answered in today's judgment, read by Court President Judge Riestal, was whether Senator Norris could claim to be himself a victim of a human rights violation. The Irish government had argued that the law in question was never used against the plaintiff, and in recent years there have been no prosecutions for private acts between consenting adults. However, the court noted that the government had no stated policy to that effect. Policy could change. Senator Norris was liable to criminal prosecution, and to make him live with that risk was a breach of his right to private life under the European Human Rights Convention. The court acknowledged that some legislation was necessary to protect minors and to safeguard the moral ethos of society. National authorities, the judgment says, do enjoy a wide margin of appreciation in matters of morals, but that discretion is not unlimited. The judgment in Senator Norris's favour was given by 8 votes to 6, with the Irish member of the court, Mr. Justice Brian Walsh, among those dissenting.
The European Court judgment has already been welcomed by a number of organisations. In the Dáil this morning, the Taoiseach Mr. Lenihan said the government would be examining in detail the judgment of what he described as this very important court.
I hope it will lead to the development of civil rights for gay people, because I think it's all too easy to look for civil rights for other people when they don't threaten you. I mean, it's easy for us in the South to look for an extension of civil rights for Roman Catholics in the North, at the same time ignoring the plight of our own minorities here.
I was just coming out at the time. It was the late 80s. I was about 14 or 15. And I got in touch with Telefriend and was phoning them. And Don Donnelly told me that he was going to be on the Late Late Show.
We are 1 in 10 people in this country, 1 in 10 people in every country. We're not obvious. We can't afford to be. Because once you realise you're gay or lesbian, you quickly realise you're not going to be given equal treatment. You stand a chance of being beaten up, sometimes by your own family. You could lose your job or have trouble getting a job in the first place. No exaggeration. I have spent the last 9 years answering phone calls on Gay Switchboard, phone calls from people who've experienced direct discrimination, people who are frightened and sometimes suicidal. To me, it's wrong, terribly wrong, but that's the way it is.
That's Don Donnelly. We have on our panel, you know the rules of the soapbox, we listen uninterrupted and then we turn it over onto the floor and to our panel. We have Moira Curran, a mother of 7, who is a barrister at law and a member of Family Solidarity. We have Kieran Rose from Cork, who is himself gay. He is a town planner and a member of the Dublin Council of Trade Unions, co-chairperson of the Gay and Lesbian Equality Network. And we have Paddy Monaghan, whom we've met before on the Late Late Show, father of 4. He's a financial consultant, just like Don Donnelly is, and he's from Kells. He's a Catholic lay missionary and a leader with Christians Concerned for Ireland.
Well, the first one I remember, I think it was Late Late or something like that. I can't even exactly remember when it was, but there was a couple of men on it and there was a woman that I remember on it. And I just remember sort of being really surprised and blown out of the water that there were people up there saying who they were and they weren't afraid, and I was almost like excited and scared at the same time.
Yes, sir. Yeah. If I put it to you, Gay, or put it to her, suppose I started saying that I'm not against you as a person. Yes. I'm just against what you do in bed. Yes. Now, would you like to say, to separate out your identity? I said to you, you can live, you can be perfect. You and Kathleen can know each other as friends, and you can be perfectly, and I'd be perfectly happy to know you and shake hands with you and say you're all right, though you're a little bit strange. And that is what is being said. In other words, don't you think that there is... No, that's what you're doing. You're trivialising my sexuality. Because as a gay man, I have the right, every right, as much as anybody else, to happiness and the fundamental right to love and affection and the love to emotion. And you are denying me that because you said that you called my sexual orientation different to my sexuality.
Nothing wrong with it.
You were saying what I do is wrong.
Just behind you, John's brother.
Homosexuality has been knocked off the list of emotional and mental illnesses by Freudian psychiatry. Many lesbian women have children either by AID or through the normal fashion. We have a right to live our lives as we wish. And on the point of low health risk, or rather high health risk, lesbians are in the lowest risk factor. Where does that leave us? Are we less abhorrent in the eyes of God? because we are in a low risk factor?
The actual programme itself was a debate. A couple of people were in the audience, a couple of people were on a panel. And also, from what I remember, there was somebody kind of centre stage at a platform who kind of gave an opening discussion, and then the debate was opened. The one thing I always remember from it, it always stuck in my head, was somebody in the audience talking about their disgust at homosexuality, and in particular young men being obsessed with other men's back passages. And for some reason it always stuck in my head Byrne's response, which was, what about all of the young men gone around obsessed with women's front passages, which I think was one of Gay's wittiest statements I ever remember him making.
It's not normal for a man to be preoccupied with another man's back passage. Well, let's face it, this is what the Homosexual Male Act is about.
I mean, that's ridiculous. That's quite insulting. Like, I mean, I am not fascinated by a man's back passage.
What about, I suppose the quick answer is, what about men who are besotted with women's front passages? Is the quick answer there?
I would like to say two things. First of all, is Paddy. Paddy was talking about homosexual sexual acts, and he is obviously this vision of back passages. There's a hell of a lot of sexual repertoire that people have. Excuse me, can I finish, please? Male, female, heterosexual, homosexual and bisexual. Now, they did a survey in Birmingham University last year, and 19% of the heterosexual couples who replied took part in anal sex. Now, if you knew anything about gay sexuality, there's a hell of a lot of other things people do, excluding anal sex. I am one of these people. I don't engage in anal sex. Anal sex to me is high-risk sex regarding AIDS, and I have a full sex life.
I remember I was seated there between two very right-wing people, and one guy in particular was an evangelical Christian, and he was a pretty nasty piece of work, and the things he was saying were pretty obnoxious, really. But in fact, that was very important, because it showed to Irish people, you know, almost everybody in those days watched the Late Late Show, and it showed to Irish people what the right-wing represented. And I think it was very important in the sense that Irish people saw that. They saw that it was a malign prospect for Irish society, and they felt they didn't want any part of that. And the lesbians and gay men, they presented a far more benign, hopeful, more human vision of Irish society, and they felt, okay, we may not know much about lesbians and gays, we not maybe even like them, but we want their view of Irish society. That's the type of society that we want to be part of.
I see no reason on earth to object to something that is inherently detrimental to society at large. It's detrimental. I'm talking now about the actions of homosexuals, the sexual acts of homosexuals. On the very recent reason to be object to it is the health thing. And all over the world at the moment, you know about AIDS, and the one group that is most at risk have been the homosexuals.
In Ireland today, I definitely feel that we have moved on from the kind of viewpoints that these people are expressing. I don't think the majority of people in Ireland today want to hear this kind of language that certain people are disordered, or that they're ill, or that should be cured, or whatever. Irish people are far more progressive than that.
Well, they're not. I mean, Moira is convinced she represents a great number of people.
But she doesn't. I know she doesn't. She doesn't. The government doesn't agree with her. And I can quote to her the government in 1988 said that discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation will not be tolerated.
Of course, nobody objects to sexual orientation. I have said it again and again, and I think it's very unfair and misleading of the gay activists to try and suggest that we people are against gays per se.
The next day, when I was going around town, going to Bewley's, shopping and so on, it was amazing the number of people who came up, just strangers out of the blue, saying, that was really good, that was brilliant, like fair dues to you, which is the classic Irish tribute to anybody or whatever, fair dues, and I think that heterosexuals were equally feeling that these right-wing people had an agenda on their sexuality, and that ordinary Irish people just did not want to be part of the society that those right-wing people wanted to create.
Glen launched its Equality Now document in Cork, and in Dublin, UCD recognised the Lesbian and Gay Society.
It's almost 3 years since the Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg ruled that Ireland's ban on homosexual acts was a breach of the European Convention. The revised programme for government, drawn up last October, said reform in legislation would be introduced as quickly as possible. Senator David Norris, whose legal action led to the Strasbourg judgment, brought the delay in homosexual law reform to the attention of the Council of Europe. He's given a guarded welcome to today's announcement and says new legislation should establish the equality of homosexuals before the law.
I also hope very much that if they do introduce legislation, they introduce humane and generous legislation, not the British model. Something much better is what Irish citizens demand. And really all I'm looking for is equality before the law, no longer to be a second-class citizen.
There was a special air of urgency and impatience about the Pride Parade in 1992. How long was it going to take for the unjust and oppressive anti-gay laws to be repealed and replaced?
I jumped into the gay community, you know, full force, and the idea of making a television programme seemed like a good idea. So when I was asked to go on it, I said I would. Even though it was an Irish language programme, they said that they would take my piece in English, so I was quite comfortable with that.
Tá sé deacar an gnéas a phlé an seo in éireann ag go háirithe dá mé ceistena faoi chuma gnéasachas ag buint leis an gnéas tá sé níos deacar fós. Mis dólam dá mé duine inán a choléocht a phlé gan na deacratí sin bheith sé níos éasca ach ní dólam go bhfuil sé sin ag tarlúint an seo in éireann in éacair níos ach tá tasnúán is dólam mar tá rudí ag athrú you know, beagánín ar beagánín agus is dólam like daoine ága inis tá sé níos éasca ná nuair a bhí mise I mo dhéagóir.
Among certain people, there are some who are quite happy with the way things are sort of, you know, I'm a woman, I'm not going to speak to a man and vice versa, and, you know.
The only reason why we could be described as a community is our desire for each other. That's what brings us together in the first place. And whether that's for love or sex or whatever, it's a desire for each other that draws us together.
When I came on, I was only on it for a minute maybe. But it was me. There was no way that anybody would mistake it, that it wasn't, you know, there was somebody else. So I was quite nervous at the time about the reaction. But I didn't have any reaction. I don't know if anybody saw it.
Following the European Court of Human Rights decision in the David Norris case, the government promised to reform the laws which criminalise homosexuality in this country. 4 years on, the law remains unchanged. The organisers of today's protests say they deliberately chose to mark the occasion in an ironic manner, because they say the laws on homosexuality have become a bad joke.
Gay Community News is put together on the second floor of a building in Temple Bar in Dublin. Its November issue takes a phrase from the Beef Tribunal row and applies it to the treatment gays say they're getting from the government. Kieran Rose is a regular contributor.
It's very hard to actually explain to any person who's heterosexual what it's like in a society to be criminalised. Nobody expects that, like I am a criminal in this society.
Richie, I think this is going to be a really good story. It's a letter we got
He says he's involved because he believes the present laws help to create a climate which encourages discrimination. Glen, the Gay and Lesbian Equality Network, was set up to campaign for equality. It wants homosexuality decriminalised and legislation to prevent discrimination. Kieran Rose is its co-chairperson. In the coming election, Glen will be lobbying the politicians for a commitment to change.
In December, President Mary Robinson welcomed a group of lesbians and gay men and their friends and families to Áras an Uachtarán and received a present from the West.
Made in Connemara this Christmas for all of Ireland's emigrants.
Very happy to accept this and to have an additional reason to burn a candle for those from the West and in the West.
Good to be back at team.
We are disappointed and surprised that the gay law reform does not appear to be the responsibility of the Minister for Equality.
And it's not. It stays with the Department of Justice.
That represents a reform of criminal law and consequently will be brought forward by my Cabinet colleague Maura Geoghegan-Quinn, but it has agreed that that will be done and quickly.
Does the panel think that the Irish Lesbian and Gay Organisation, the majority of whom are Irish-born, should be allowed to march in the St Patrick's Day Parade?
My views are fairly well known on gays and lesbians, and I think they have no part in this very colourful parade.
Well, I would be in favour of their partaking, because this parade historically was an opportunity for a very oppressed group, the Irish in 19th century America, to declare their pride.
I think it's ridiculous to be excluding people out of a parade like this. If it is the showcase of Ireland, we have to include everybody in it.
So the first question is, the people who are organising this parade, who have the franchise, can legitimately decide. The second question then is that, should people of the gay and lesbian movement, which they're just using this particular parade to bring forward their particular cause. Now, I personally have no difficulties, and I've never had, with gay and lesbian groups.
In view of the controversy in the United States as to whether declared homosexuals should be allowed to join the military services, I asked the Minister what was the attitude of the Defence Forces here to that particular question.
That question is never put to anybody joining the Defence Forces, one's sexual orientation, and that will remain the position.
About 8 years ago. I came out to my family maybe 10 years ago, and then came out to other gay people about 8 years ago.
When did you fall in love?
Well, that was actually a short time after I came out. I first came out to my friends, and then to some of my colleagues at work, and then to my family eventually, after I had led a lifestyle of a gay man for around a year. I met John kind of 6 weeks after I came out and fell passionately in love.
One of the problems we had in actually devising this programme, we found great reluctance on the part of women to actually go public on that. Are you a little bit more reticent?
Well, no, but as far as being public about it is with families, jobs, lesbian mothers, kids going to school.
Your own experience, Nuala. You live in Galway, so you do.
I live in Galway for the last 7-8 years.
Yeah.
And the lesbian community has grown tremendously,
I'm against any liberalisation of it. I think the British model has even gone too far as I'm concerned. Well, don't interrupt me, please.
The man over there is wrong when he states that heterosexual people are allowed to commit any acts they wish to commit. In the law, it's not an anti-homosexual law. It's a law against buggery and indecency, basically. So so in other words, if a man and woman want to commit buggery, that is against the law at the moment. Or if a man and woman commit oral sex, that's against the law at the moment. Excuse me, it is. Okay. Indecency.
Let's get away from the plumbing. Bill Scott, I want to put the point that Chris made there.
Well, the plumbing's a part of it. Excuse me, plumbing is that's what we're against.
I think we've had enough of it. That's what you're against.
So what we'd like to know is exactly what is Maura Geoghegan-Quinn legalising? Is she legalising buggery? Is she legalising bestiality? Is she legalising sodomy? Is she legalising gross and decent acts between male consenting people? Is that what she's legalising? Is that what she wants the people of Ireland to legalise for their children coming up? Is that what she wants?
I think this is, I'm always, when I listen to this, I listen to these kind of words a lot, and one part of me gets very angry because I think that man is talking about me, he's talking about people I hold very dear, and I get very angry about that. I also feel very sad for that man, because, I mean... I feel
very sad for you.
What is it that's eating him up? Do you know what I mean? That he feels like attacking me. I have no desire to attack him. I have no interest in his sexual life. I hope he has a great sexual life, but I'm not interested.
There was one moment in that programme I'll always remember, and it is Kieran Rose's reaction to the hate that was coming from people who were sitting behind him, and how he challenged them about, do they really represent people's sense of fairness and justice and solidarity that I still think exists in Ireland to this day.
This does not represent Irish society. I know Irish society through my trade union movement, and I have been all over the country with my trade union, and I know that Irish people are committed to justice, to social justice. The Catholic Church is committed to social justice.
Let him finish.
And I think that the Irish people have no respect at all for bigotry, and they're totally opposed to discrimination. And I think most Irish people will welcome, when they see it, they'll welcome the change in the law, and they'll welcome a type of a society where there's room for everybody, for travellers, for lesbians and gay men, for people with disabilities, for everybody.
There are so many different lifestyles in our society, and that within broad legal limits we have to trust our citizens to exercise freedom with responsibility. We are long past the day when personal morality could be enforced by the methods of a police state.
The trend to liberalise homosexual activity will lead to a situation where homosexual relationships will be seen as a valid alternative to marriage.
But inside the House, it was the provisions of the bill dealing with prostitution.
After 20 years of hard work and commitment from so many men and women, the law was reformed, and the first step on the path to full equality had been taken.
Johnny Fox called for a vote, but the Ceann Comhairle said because a sufficient number of tellers had not been appointed, he was declaring the legislation carried. Outside Leinster House, members of the gay community were celebrating the acceptance by the Dáil of the bill to decriminalise homosexuality.
1993 was a terrific pause. We were being fed on the drip feed. It's going to happen, it's going to happen, it's going to happen this week, decriminalisation. And of course it finally happened the day before the parade.